Hi, welcome back to Follet, the video book. We're going to read the second part of chapter 10 today. And so if you're comfortable, we'll begin. Here we go. They called the elevator and rode down, holding hands. They crossed the lobby to the tables near the bar and sat down. A heavily inked and studded young man appeared almost immediately. "What can I get you?" he smiled. "Coffee, please, and I'd kill for a big slice of banana pudding pie. Is there any chance of that?" Follet said. The young man grinned. "Our specialty. We've got Colombian, Costa Rican, espresso, cafe cubano, and Ashmedai's favorite, light roast Ethiopian robusta. That will start your engines." Follet looked at Meri and she nodded. "2 slices of pie and 2 cups of the Ethiopian, please." The man nodded. "Coming right up." Follet looked across the little table and pushed his hand forward to touch Meri's. She smiled as their fingers tips touched. "Excuse me, Follet, may we intrude?" Follet looked up. A cadaverous elder incubus with long white hair that cascaded over his shoulders and piercing dark brown eyes stood next to another incubus who might have been dressed by a blind man, wearing striped polyester golf pants, white bucks, and a clashing plaid sports shirt. The incubus with the ridiculously loud wardrobe wore thick, square black plastic glasses, and his hair was cut short in a flat top. The loudly dressed incubus introduced himself and his companion. "I'm Asmodeus, and this is my father, Dave. We'd like to talk to you about something very important. May we join you?" Follet glanced at Meri and saw her nod slightly. "Sure, gents, have a seat." "Thanks." And as they sat, the waiter returned with the pies and coffees. The waiter never missed a beat. "Coffee, sir?" "Please," Dave said. 1 cafe cubano and 1 decaf Colombian." The waiter nodded and disappeared. "Do you mind if I tell you our story while you eat?" Dave asked. "No problem," Follet said, and cut a good-sized chunk of pie with his fork and shoveled it into his mouth. Meri smirked and did the same. "I guess you've heard about the exorcisms," Dave began. "I was a witness to one in Nebraska. I couldn't do anything to stop those bastards, but I cared for their victim after they left," Follet said. Both Asmodeus and Dave stared at Follet. "It was terrible and I was helpless. They were able to bar me from entering the house. That was a couple of days ago. I met Meri in southern Missouri after I left Nebraska. We both had work to do on the way and holed up here for some R&R. So far, there have been isolated incidents like yours in Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky, but we've heard that the exorcists have taken over an entire city east of Memphis," Dave continued. "A city? Where?" gasped Meri. "Nashville," whispered Asmodeus. "Wait a minute," Follet interrupted. "Exorcisms are highly labor-intensive. They need a lot of people to expel one person's dreams. How did they manage to do that to an entire city of 1 million people?" Dave said, "Well, the city of Nashville has a population of about 600,000, but the metropolitan area is about 3 times that. Let's just call it 1 million or so." "Either way, how?" Follet asked, amazed. "We don't think that they've had the time to take away everyone's dreams yet, but they've managed to erect a barrier so that incubi and succubi cannot enter." "I don't understand," said Meri, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I think it has to do with mass baptisms. In the baptismal service, the priest exorcises evil spirits by swinging a censer of myrrh in all the corners of the room. In Nashville, the exorcists have convinced the city fathers to burn huge pyres of myrrh at the central points of the northern, southern, eastern, and western city limits. For the traditional baptism, the priest symbolically separates the realm of the sacred from the profane by blowing on the child, making the sign of the cross, putting salt in the babe's mouth, and rubbing spittle on the baby's nostrils and ears as a measure of protection to ward off evil. We think that, besides burning the incense, there are roving bands of men in black robes and red, meeting anyone on the street and completing the ritual of symbolic separation. What they're doing is keeping us from our dreamers, and separating the dreamers from their dreams under the guise of preventing the profane in a sacred city." "That's obscene," Meri whispered, unable to even speak about such depravity. "Yes," agreed Dave. "Why did the people put up with this?" Meri asked, incredulous. "We're not sure," Dave said. "We haven't been able to get any one of our folks into the city." "What can we do?" Meri asked. "That's a good question," Dave said. "We've sent a message to New Orleans to Fobator, his children, and the Marts. They're our only hope." "Who?" Meri asked. "Fobator is the dream messenger, Morpheus' brother, the son of darkness. Fobator is a winged demon who brings nightmares and forms dreams into beasts and birds and long sliding snakes. Fobator's children are the shapes of nightmares themselves, touching every person who sleeps. The Marts crush sleepers to death. They ride in on horses, and even though windows and doors of a house may be tightly closed and locked, they can still get in through the smallest openings. The marks creep up a sleeping person's body from the feet to the stomach and finally to the chest. The sleeper cannot move a muscle and suffocates. As long as the exorcists must sleep, they're vulnerable. And if people go without sleep for too long a time, they can go mad. If they do not sleep at all, they may contract fatal insomnia, and death occurs within 18 months. Then there is hope, Meri said. Oh yes, replied Dave. We can fight this scourge, but it will take time. Our strongest weapon right now is to stay alert and be aware of new outbreaks of exorcism. How do we do that? Follet asked. WINC is acting as our radio lounge. Between the songs, there will be personal messages, places to avoid, times to lay low, tributes to the fallen. They've taken our brothers and sisters. Follet was aghast at the thought. An incubus and 2 succubi are overdue in Kentucky. We're tracking them and hoping for the best, Dave told him. We wanted to tell you two what we know. When you meet our brothers and sisters on the road, please tell them. We'll let you finish your breakfast in peace. Travel safely. The 2 incubi stood and shook Follet's and Meri's hands. When they had left, Meri looked at Follet. Why didn't you tell me, Follet? What were you thinking? Anger flashed like lightning across the blue sky of her eyes. I thought it was just one poor soul in a random hateful act. I was wrong, Meri. I should have told you. Follet reached for Meri's hand. She took his hand and slowly squeezed it. I understand, but never hide from me, Follet. I'm stronger than you know. Follet smiled. I know that now, Meri. Come on, let's finish this pie and get on the road. Meri answered by cutting through the whipped cream, sliced bananas, vanilla pudding, and vanilla wafers, eagerly putting the forkful into her mouth. She chewed the sweet pie and swallowed it and reached for the little pitcher of cream and a cube of sugar to add to her coffee. She added them and stirred the dark brew. She lifted the cup to her lips and took a small sip. The pie is ambrosial and this coffee is like liquid lightning. There's so much caffeine that I'll be buzzed all the way to Knoxville, she told him. Follet smiled at her. They finished the coffee and pie, and while Follet went to the front desk to check out, Meri visited the bathroom. Thanks for everything, Ashmedai. I wish that we could see you more often, Follet. Which way are you headed? To Nashville and points east, my friend, Follet said. Be safe, Follet. Be safe. Ashmedai held out his hand to Follet. Follet took Ashmedai's hand and enclosed it in both of his, until I see you again. Follet turned and met Meri halfway across the lobby. Meri smiled and waved at Ashmedai, and the 2 lovers walked out the big brass doors and into the blazing sunlight. Follet drove quickly through Memphis, ignoring the signs to Graceland, almost stopping to pay homage to Sun Studios and Stax. He was pulled to head southwest and make his pilgrimage to Holly Springs, Mississippi, to breathe the air that spawned the hill country drone blues of R.L. Burnside and Junior Kimbrough. That act of devotion, though, would have to wait for another day. He was pulled to the east, actually northeast, taking the little country roads that he loved, past Nutbush and Humboldt and Camden. But when he neared Dickinson, it was nothing he heard exactly. It was nothing that he felt exactly. It was nothing that he saw exactly. It was as if a breeze cried out, no, and the air got thicker the closer he came. And the rich palette of colors that the earth and the sky dressed in was covered in thin layers of ash, again and again and again the closer he came to Nashville. And then Meri said, Hey, did you hear that, Follet? And turned up the radio. The WINC DJ spoke clearly and solemnly. I repeat, before we begin, please listen to some personal messages. For those near Nashville or heading that way, there's a fire at the Opry. For those thinking about a vacation in Gary, Indiana, U.S. Steel is falling down. And then he played. I had a dream. Aw, shucks, so well. Now it's all fucked up. It's shot to hell. Yeah, my shit's fucked up. It has to happen to the best of us. The rich folks suffer like the best of us. It'll happen to you. That amazing grace sort of passed you by. You wake up every day and you start to cry. Yeah, you want to die, but you just can't quit. Let me break it on down. That's some fucked up shit. Follet and Meri drove on together, neither one able to speak. Follet turned south, and the cries and the pressure and the grayness became incrementally less and less. After a few miles, he turned east again. Everything was normal for a few miles. He turned south to escape the oppressive words that he could almost hear, and the pressure that he could almost feel until the colors he saw became themselves again. When the world was right again, Follet turned east. He saw a sign for Lynchburg, and even though the drive so far had unsettled him enough that he needed a drink, he continued east toward Chattanooga. He crossed the Tennessee River just past Jasper and passed just north of Lookout Mountain. He threaded his way through the little city and turned north when the White Oak Mountains reared up in front of them. He eventually came to the interstate, crossed Louderback Ridge at Green Gap, and stayed on the highway until Cleveland. Follet looked over at Meri. She was asleep, her mouth slightly open, curled up in the bucket seat. He could hear her soft breathing, almost a gentle snore. They hadn't got much sleep last night. Follet smiled at all of his memories of their first night together.